Hi, this is David at MASH IT. Now we've recently reviewed both the M15 R4 and the M17 R4. So I thought whilst I've got them both in the office, let's put them together and take a look at them side by side, see what the differences are between the 15 and the 17 inch on both a size aspect, but also, and more importantly, a thermal aspect. What I want to look at is, does the 17 inch with its larger body size cool better than the more compact 15 inch? Logically, you would say yes, but we're going to put it to the test. To start with, what I'm going to do is look at them side by side, look at the size differences, and then check them over, see what differences they've got between buying the 17 inch and the 15 inch, and then we're going to look at the performance. So first things first, specs wise, they're very similar. They've both got the Intel 8-core 16-thread CPU, just the i7, not the i9, and they've both got the 140-watt 3070. The 17 inch has a 360Hz screen and the 15 inch has a 300Hz screen. The 17 inch has 16 gigabytes of RAM, whereas the 15 inch has 32 gigabytes of RAM, but that's not going to make a difference in these tests. And lastly, the 17 inch came with a single 512 gigabyte SSD, whereas the 15 inch came with two 256 gigabyte SSD in a RAID 0 configuration. So let's look at the sizes first of all. So 17 inch, this is still a slim and light, and you can still pick it up with one hand. It's not overly heavy, but when you compare it to the 15 inch, this is much easier to pick up and wield with just one hand. The 17 inch is more of an effort. The 15 inch is really quite easy just to pick up and wave around. I'm going to quickly place them on top of each other. And you can see that there is quite a difference in size from the actual form factor of each. Now personally, I do prefer a 17 inch laptop, but the way I use a laptop, or a gaming laptop in particular, is I will take it from place to place, I'll pop it on the desk, and I prefer that 17 inch screen. But if you do want the mobility, the 15 inch, you can see there's quite a big difference, and it's so much easier to just pick up and throw in a bag than the 17 inch. Not that this 17 inch is big, this is still a nice slim and light 17 inch laptop. So you can see their side view. There we go, rear view. You can see there is quite a difference in size between the 17 inch and the 15 inch laptop. Okay, so let's open them up, look inside, see the differences. So 17 inch is got a stiffer hinge, there isn't one hand opening, whereas the 15 inch, I think because it's a bit lighter, the hinge is a bit easier to open, you've got a one hand opening option. So now that both the laptops are open, you can see straight away a couple of differences. Obviously, the 17 inch is bigger on the desk, you've got a bigger screen. When you're using the laptop, if you're using it as a desktop replacement and you're going to be looking at the screen a lot, I prefer having that 17 inch screen, especially when you're gaming. I find it more immersive looking at this 17 inch screen than I do a 15 inch screen when I'm actually playing the game. I feel with a 15 inch I'm leaning right in to see the details of the game that I'm playing. Now, other than the actual size of the laptop, you'll notice that the actual keyboards themselves are different. Now, the 15 inch has a centered keyboard with no number pad. I have to be honest, that is my preferred keyboard style because I like the fact that it's centered right above the middle of the touchpad. It's nicely centered, so when you type, you're not resting on the touchpad. On the 17 inch, you've got a full-size keyboard with a number pad. And it's obviously shifted the keyboard across more to the left to fit obviously the number pad in, so your hands are more over the left-hand side if you're typing. Again, a lot of people prefer that number pad, so they will prefer this keyboard. My personal preference is without a number pad. And when we look at the actual touchpads themselves, you'll see that the 17 inch has a much larger touchpad. Now, it's not much more wide than the 15 inch, but it's a lot taller than the 15 inch, so it's a lot more comfortable scrolling around on the 17 inch touchpad. Now, these are both 1080p high refresh displays. This is a 360Hz display, this is a 300Hz display. They're both brilliant displays, they're both incredibly fast, and they've both got low input times, so they are great machines for gaming on. With both of these displays though, they've got the Intel integrated GPU disabled, so neither of these machines have decent battery lives. They're both 2 to 2.5 hours on light use. So if you want a longer battery life, make sure you buy the 144Hz display that still has Optimus. But these with the high refresh displays, they don't have Optimus, so you will have poor battery life. There's not even any point me comparing them because they're both poor. They've both got great speakers. They've both got the same very average webcam and microphones as you get in most gaming laptops. So this is all pretty much a wash. So it's all really realistically down to, do you want the number pad with a slightly larger touchpad, or do you want that extra mobility with the centered keyboard and a smaller touchpad? All the ports are the same on both these machines, so if you're buying the smaller laptop, you're getting the same number of ports, so that's not an issue. They both have PD charging, so you can use your own power bank or USB-C charger if you're on the go, and all the internals are the same depending on which you actually buy. But what we are going to do now is we're going to open it up and we're going to have a look at the actual internals and see if they're the same with regards to the batteries and the vapor chamber, and then we're going to look at performance. Right, so just in looking inside the laptops now, we've got the M17 R4 on the left and the M15 R4 on the right. So just to show you the similarities between the two, although the 17-inch is slightly bigger, they've both got 86 watt-hour batteries. They've both got the same 4-speaker system, so you can see one of those on either side, plus another one underneath at the bottom there. That's where they sound the same. Where the differences come into play, you see the fans are bigger on the 17-inch. It's not a lot, but it does make a bit of a difference to the cooling. You see that is just about 9 centimeters, and that one is about 7.5 centimeters, so a little bit bigger. Now the next thing to note between the two, you can see the soldered on Wi-Fi card on both. Then you can see the M.2 slots. So now the 17-inch, you can see we've got the sort of the copper plates hiding a 80mm 512GB SSD, and on the 15-inch you can see we've got the two drives in RAID. Now if you've noticed, they've used 42mm, the smaller SSDs for those two 256GB SSDs. Now something that I get asked all the time, and it really is annoying with these laptops for some unknown reason, and I got it wrong myself on the last time that I did a review. This 2230 slot here, this is the third slot. Now in the 17-inch I've got here a 128GB 30mm drive. Now if I pop that in, you can see on the 17-inch the 30mm fits absolutely perfectly. So 30mm SSD in the M17. Right, so now you'd think that'd be exactly the same on the 15-inch, but I'm going to slide it in on the 15-inch, avoiding the camera. So there we go, on the 15-inch, I've put it in, and you can see the hole where it should be, but it's actually, the screw hole is actually a 42mm. So M17 R4, the third bay is a 30mm M.2. M15 R4, the third bay is actually a 42mm M.2. So just be careful if you are trying to populate that third bay. Now lastly, with both these machines, as you can see, they've got some little material over here to stop some of the heat, but they are both inverted motherboards. So if you do want to repaste, you will have to take the entire motherboard out, flip it to get to the actual heat sinks to repaste it. It is a real pain. That's about all there is to say. Obviously the RAM is soldered on, so there's no point even looking at that. So having looked inside of these machines, we're now going to look at the actual performance. We know that the M17 has got slightly larger fans and a vapor chamber cooler than the M15. So what we're going to do is we're going to put the fans on maximum, so there's no variation between the two fan profiles. And we're going to run a couple of benchmarks. First, we're going to run Cinebench on both of these machines. Now I'm going to put Task Manager and Throttle Stop on the screen so that you can see the sort of the frequency and the wattage and the temperatures for both of these machines, because that's what's important here. The scores aren't as important, although the M17 does score higher. The M17 scores 3,920 in comparison to the M15's 3,731. So you're only talking about sort of 8% difference between the two, but there is a difference there. But what is more important is when we look at the actual wattage of the CPU and the actual temperatures of the CPU. Now the M17, it stays boosted between 104 and 105 watts almost indefinitely. You can just leave Cinebench running over and over again and it will stay at about that 105 watts. And whilst it's doing that, on this max fan, without any undervolting, it will stay at a maximum of about 74C. That's a really quite an impressive result for a slim and light that's running at 104 watt CPU, 8 core 16 threads. Now in comparison, the M15 with its slightly smaller cooling system, after a while in Cinebench, it does start to throttle. It goes from the 105 watts, it will start dropping down to about 90 watts as it starts heating up. And the CPU, even at maximum fans, will heat up to 100C. Now there's a way that we can improve this, and we are doing another video where we're looking at tuning the performance of the M15 and the M17 by undervolting and tweaking the actual system itself. So please like and subscribe if you'd like to watch that in the future. But as it is, being a smaller system, these are still pretty good results. We're running a 8-core 16-thread CPU, even at the throttle state, at about 90 watts. So really quite impressive results, even for the M15, although it definitely isn't good as its bigger brother, the M17. So now we're going to look at the 3D side of things. So we're going to look at Unigine Valley. The thing I like about Unigine Valley, we can just leave it running and we don't have to worry about the actual test finishing, and therefore we can have, we can saturate the heatsink itself so we can see, how well it's doing. Now the scores of these are much more similar between the two. The M17 scored 5,177 in comparison to the M15's 5,041. So although there is a little bit of a difference, it's quite minor between these two. What is more noticeable and is more interesting is the actual temperature difference between the two machines. The M17 runs between 10 and 20 C cooler than the M15. Now bear in mind these are both on maximum fans, so there's no difference in fan speeds. The M17 is just running that 10 to 20 degrees cooler at all times than the M15. That's just due to the slightly larger chassis and the larger fans pumping that hot air out easier than the M15 can. So in conclusion on the performance, we can see that the M17 is definitely quite a bit better than the M15. And obviously Dell realised this as well, because the M17, if you look at its upper range, the 3080 will have a higher wattage on the M17 than the M15's 3080. So they know that there's that extra cooling capacity on the M17. Now that's not to say the M15 is bad, these are still great results for a slim and light laptop, but if you want the best of the best, you've got to look at the M17. So on to the conclusion. Should you buy the M15 or should you buy the M17? There's obviously no perfect laptop for any one person. Now me personally, my favourite is always going to be the 17-inch. I'm never bothered so much about portability. I want to have the biggest screen I can possibly have in a laptop, because that's more useful to me if I'm going to sit here gaming on an actual gaming laptop itself. If you're somebody that values portability and wants to be able to cart it around, pop it out on a desk and use it and then chuck it in a bag and go, then definitely the 15-inch is the way forward. You can see when we put them side by side that there is quite a difference in size between the M15 and the M17, and not only the actual size of the laptop but the weight. It's so much easier to pick the M15 up in one hand and throw it in a bag. I mean, this does sound a bit like first world problems. They're both slim and light laptops, but if you're comparing the two, the M15 is definitely a lot more portable. Also, I do like the centered keyboard on the M15. Again, this is personal preference. A lot of people I know much prefer a number pad, and they will definitely have to go for the M17 if that is the case. But me personally, I love a centered keyboard. So the last thing I want to talk about just before I sum this up, obviously we want to talk about battery life. We've got the high-end screen models on both of these machines, so therefore we don't have Optimus on either. Now the M17 does have G-Sync with its 360Hz panel, and the M15 doesn't have G-Sync. So if you're looking for the best of the best gaming performance wise, then your M17 with the 360Hz panel and the better cooling is the way to go. The M15 is still a great option, and as I say, it is much more portable. If you want battery life though, you're going to need to step yourself down to the 144Hz panel, which does provide Advanced Optimus. Now unfortunately we haven't got one of those in yet. We will likely be getting one in soon to test that model as well. But from what I've heard from other people, you're looking at about 5 to 7 hours of battery life if you enable the Advanced Optimus. Well, hopefully that's answered your questions. Hopefully this video has been useful to you. If there is anything I haven't covered, please pop it down in the comment section down below and I will get back to you. We will be doing plenty more videos on the M15, plus we have plenty more laptops coming in over the next couple of weeks. So please like and subscribe and hit the notification bell and you will be notified of our upcoming content. And lastly, thank you for watching.